The November rain fell like lead pennies on Mulberry Street, turning the cobblestones into black mirrors that reflected the neon signs of Little Italy's social clubs. Catherine Moretti stood at her bedroom window on the third floor above Lombardi's bakery, watching the steam rise from the grates below while her two children slept in the next room. At 35, she had learned to read the neighborhood's rhythms, the pattern of footsteps, the timing of car doors, the coded knock that meant business, not family. Tonight, those rhythms were wrong. Her husband, Vincent's Lincoln Continental, sat at the corner of Hester and Mulberry for 43 minutes. She'd counted. Vincent never sat anywhere for more than 20. He moved through the city like water finding cracks, always flowing, never still. Construction permits, union negotiations, city contracts. Vincent Moretti made things happen, and things that happened made him wealthy. Not rich, he'd always insisted. Wealthy was quieter, smarter. The telephone's ring split the silence at 11:47 p.m. Catherine knew before she lifted the receiver. Some knowledge arrives not through words, but through the quality of silence that precedes them. Mrs. Moretti. Detective Calabresi's voice carried the studied neutrality of a man delivering news he'd delivered before. I need you to come down to Bellevue. There's been an incident. She dressed in the dark, leaving the children with Rosa downstairs, and rode in the back of a patrol car that smelled of coffee and cigarettes and other people's emergencies. The morgue attendant pulled back the sheet with practiced efficiency. Vincent's face looked smaller in death, as if something essential had been removed beyond just breath. A single bullet hole behind his left ear. Professional. Clean. The kind of work that sent a message. Catherine didn't cry. She'd learned crying at her Sicilian grandmother's knee. When to do it, how much, and most importantly, never where it could be mistaken for weakness. Instead, she studied her husband's face and made calculations. The diamond cufflinks he'd worn to dinner were gone. So was his wallet, but his wedding ring remained, and that told her everything. This wasn't robbery. This was theater. Who found him? She asked. Beat cop on Canal Street. Car was running. Radio on. Looked like he was waiting for someone. Calabresi watched her carefully. You know of any meetings he had scheduled? My husband had meetings the way other men have heartbeats. Catherine pulled her coat tighter. Constantly, and I stopped counting. She signed papers at the precinct, answered questions she barely heard, and rode home in a taxi as dawn broke gray and cold over the East River. The neighborhood was waking up. Bakery ovens firing, newspaper trucks rattling past, the coffee shops on Mott Street raising their metal shutters. Life continuing with the indifference that separates the living from those who grieve them. Rosa met her at the door, eyes red, already knowing. News in Little Italy traveled faster than ambulances. Catherine climbed the stairs to her apartment and sat at Vincent's desk. Mahogany, expensive, covered in papers she'd never been allowed to touch. Now they were hers. The construction company, the union connections, the city contracts, the debts both legitimate and otherwise. All of it suddenly, impossibly, hers. She opened the ledger. Vincent's handwriting was precise, almost delicate. Income in black ink, expenses in red. But there was another column, unmarked, in pencil. Numbers that didn't quite add up. Payments to men she didn't know. Receipts from companies that didn't exist. Her husband, it seemed, had been keeping 2 sets of books, and the real one painted a picture of a man in deeper than he'd ever admitted. The phone rang at 7 a.m. Catherine let it ring 6 times before answering. Mrs. Moretti, Tony DeLuca. I'm sorry about Vincent. The voice was rough. Brooklyn edged. Listen, about the Riverside project. We need to talk about payment schedules. The funeral is Friday, Catherine said. Yeah, of course, but after. We should meet. There's money owed, and with Vincent gone, the business continues, Mr. DeLuca. The debts will be paid according to contract. She kept her voice level, businesslike. After the funeral, we'll discuss terms. She hung up before he could respond. It was the first of 17 calls that day. Suppliers wanting payment, union reps wanting assurances, city inspectors suddenly remembering code violations, and underneath it all, the careful dance of men testing a woman's resolve, waiting to see if Vincent's widow would fold or fight. Catherine spent that week in Vincent's office, learning a language she'd only heard in fragments through closed doors. Construction wasn't just concrete and steel. It was favors and percentages, handshakes that meant more than contracts, and silences that cost more than words. Her husband had built an empire on knowing who to pay, who to pressure, and who to avoid. Now she had to learn those rules fast enough to survive. Friday arrived cold and bright. The funeral at Old St. Patrick's Cathedral drew 300 people. Family, workers, politicians, and men in expensive suits who stood at the back and didn't take communion. Catherine wore black Chanel and her grandmother's pearl rosary. She didn't cry during the service. Didn't cry at the cemetery in Queens where Vincent was buried next to his father. She saved her tears for midnight, alone in her bedroom, where grief was a private thing that couldn't be weaponized. The following Monday, she walked into Moretti Construction's office on Delancey Street. The secretary, Mrs. Chen, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "I'll be taking over," Catherine said simply. "Please schedule a meeting with all department heads for tomorrow morning at 9, and get me Vincent's attorney on the phone." Mrs. Chen blinked. "All of them? The union reps too?" "Everyone Vincent answered to, and everyone who answered to Vincent. I want them all in one room." Catherine walked toward Vincent's office, then paused. "And Mrs. Chen, we're going to need more coffee." The conference room on the second floor of Moretti Construction smelled like cigarettes and nervous sweat. Catherine arrived at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the meeting, and found 12 men already seated around the long oak table. They'd come early to talk without her, to coordinate their strategy. She'd expected that. She set her briefcase on the table with a deliberate click. All conversation stopped. Frank Palmieri, the company's senior foreman, cleared his throat and stood, a gesture that was either respect or dominance. Catherine wasn't sure which yet. "Mrs. Moretti, please accept our condolences. Vincent was a good man, a fair boss. Sit down, Frank." Catherine remained standing, forcing them to look up at her. She'd worn a charcoal suit, severe and expensive, with her hair pulled back tight. No softness, no invitation for paternal condescension. "We're not here to eulogize. We're here to discuss the future of this company." She opened her briefcase and distributed folders to each man. Inside were photocopies of contracts, payment schedules, and, most importantly, the pencil-marked ledger entries she'd found in Vincent's desk. "I've spent the last week reviewing our books," she continued. "We have 4 active projects, 6 pending contracts, and approximately $47,000 in outstanding debts. We also have some discrepancies in how money has been moving through this company." Tony DeLuca, the union representative she'd spoken with on the phone, leaned back in his chair. His suit was expensive but worn at the cuffs. A man who'd had money once and was determined to look like he still did. "With all respect, Mrs. Moretti, these are complicated matters. Construction isn't like running a household. Maybe it'd be better if we brought in a consultant, someone with experience. Someone like you, Mr. DeLuca." Catherine's smile was sharp. "I notice you've been receiving a monthly retainer of $500. For what exactly? According to these contracts, your union already charges fees for labor placement. So what is this second payment for?" The room went quiet. DeLuca's face colored. "That's a consulting fee." Vincent understood how business works in the city. "You need friends at the union, at City Hall. You need grease money," Catherine said flatly. "I understand perfectly. What I don't understand is why we're paying triple the going rate. The Genovese crew gets the same access for half the price. So either you're spectacularly good at your job, or my husband was spectacularly bad at negotiating." She let that hang in the air. Vincent hadn't been bad at negotiating, which meant the overpayment had a reason, and that reason was sitting somewhere in this room, probably multiple somewheres, all of them wondering how much she actually knew. Leonard Schwartz, the company attorney, adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Moretti, perhaps we should discuss this privately. These are sensitive matters. Nothing about this company will be private anymore." Catherine sat down finally, taking Vincent's chair at the head of the table. "Gentlemen, let me be clear. I'm not here to be managed, consoled, or eased into a figurehead position. I'm here because this company is my children's inheritance, and I will not let it collapse because a room full of men decided a widow couldn't handle the truth." She opened Vincent's real ledger, the one she'd found in a false bottom of his desk drawer, the one that showed where every dollar actually went. Payments to city inspectors, kickbacks to union bosses, monthly envelopes to the Vitale family. Her husband had been keeping the peace through systematic bribery, and now that peace was fracturing. "We're going to restructure everything," Catherine announced. "Starting with these side payments. I want a full accounting of who gets what and why. Then I want recommendations for cuts. We're hemorrhaging money to keep people comfortable, and that stops today." Frank Palmieri shook his head slowly. "Mrs. Moretti, With respect, you can't just cut these arrangements. These people, they're not going to negotiate. They'll shut us down. No inspections pass, no permits get approved, no workers show up. Your husband understood that you have to feed the machine to keep it running. Then we'll build a different machine. Catherine stood again, gathering her papers. You have until Friday to provide those accounting reports. Anyone who can't justify their payments will be renegotiated or eliminated. We're going to run this company like a business, not a charity for corrupt officials. She walked out before anyone could argue. It was a calculated risk, leaving them in the room to talk without her. But she needed them to understand she wasn't asking permission. The game had changed, and so had the rules. That afternoon, Catherine met with Leonard Schwartz in a coffee shop on Grand Street, far from the office. The attorney stirred his espresso 3 times before speaking. You're playing with fire, he said quietly. Vincent built those relationships over 20 years. You can't dismantle them in a week. Vincent's relationships got him killed, Leonard. Or did you think that was random? Catherine kept her voice low, controlled. Someone decided he was a liability. Maybe he wouldn't pay enough. Maybe he knew too much. Either way, continuing his playbook gets me the same result. Schwartz set down his spoon. Then what's your play? Transparency. We document everything. We pay what we legally owe, and we stop being a piggy bank for every connected guy in Little Italy. It makes us less profitable in the short term, but it also makes us less interesting. You can't blackmail someone who's already showing their books. And when the Vitale family comes calling? Because they will. Catherine sipped her coffee, buying time to organize her thoughts. The Vitales were the real problem. Vincent had been paying them protection money disguised as consulting fees. $5,000 a month to ensure the company's trucks didn't get hijacked, its workers didn't get intimidated, its sites didn't mysteriously catch fire. When they come calling, she said finally, I'm going to offer them something better than money. Information. Names of every city official taking bribes, every union rep on the take, every contractor cutting corners. Vincent kept records of everything because he was smart. Now those records become leverage. Schwartz paled. That's suicide. You turn informant and you're dead within a week. I'm not turning informant. I'm offering a trade. They leave us alone, we keep the records locked away. They push us and suddenly the FBI gets very interested in how construction works in this city. Mutually assured destruction, Leonard. It's not elegant, but it's effective. The attorney studied her face for a long moment. You're nothing like Vincent. No, Catherine agreed. I'm meaner. Vincent wanted to be liked. I just want to survive. She spent the next 3 days learning her husband's business from the ground up. She visited construction sites in Queens and Brooklyn, talking to foremen and workers, learning the difference between a union carpenter and a company man, understanding why concrete costs more in August than April. She sat through city planning meetings, watching how deals were made in the margins of official agendas. She memorized names, faces, allegiances. At night, she returned to the apartment above Lombardi's bakery and helped her children with homework, made dinner, pretended normalcy. Her son Michael, 12, asked once if they'd have to move. Her daughter Angela, 10, asked if someone killed Daddy. Catherine answered honestly but carefully. Yes, someone killed him. No, they wouldn't move. This was their home, their business, their fight. Friday came. The accounting reports arrived on her desk at 8 a.m. Catherine spent 2 hours reviewing them, marking discrepancies in red ink. Then she called a second meeting. This time, she brought documentation, bank statements, canceled checks, receipts for payments that never showed up in official ledgers. She laid them out on the conference table like playing cards. Here's what's going to happen, she announced. Every questionable payment gets audited. Every side deal gets documented. Every handshake arrangement gets a paper trail. We're going legit, gentlemen. And anyone who can't work within those parameters is welcome to find employment elsewhere. Tony DeLuca stood abruptly. You're making a mistake. A big one. You think you're cleaning house, but you're just pissing off people who can bury you. Then let them try. Catherine met his glare without blinking. You're fired, Mr. DeLuca. Mrs. Chen will have your severance check ready by end of business. Consider it generous given what I could do with what I know about your arrangement with Inspector Morrison. DeLuca's face went white, then red. For a moment, Catherine thought he might hit her. Instead, he grabbed his coat and slammed out of the room. The door's bang echoed like a gunshot. Catherine looked around the table at the remaining men. Anyone else have concerns? Silence. Then Frank Palmieri, slowly, nodded. All right, Mrs. Moretti. We'll try it your way. But understand you just made enemies. Real ones. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I, Frank, Catherine said quietly. So do I. The first brick came through Catherine's office window on a Tuesday afternoon in December. It missed her head by 6 inches and demolished the coffee pot. Attached was a note. Widows should mourn, not manage. She swept up the glass herself, refusing to let the workers see her shaken. Then she called a glazier and installed bars on all the windows. The message was clear. Someone wanted her scared, wanted her to understand that Vincent's way had been the safe way, and her reforms were bringing unwanted attention. The harassment escalated methodically. 2 of their work trucks got their tires slashed. A cement delivery was mysteriously rerouted to Newark. An electrical inspection that should have taken an hour stretched into 3 days while the inspector found increasingly creative code violations. Each incident cost time and money, and Catherine could feel the pressure mounting. She responded by documenting everything. Every threat, every delay, every suspicious coincidence got logged, dated, and filed. If she was going down, she'd take detailed notes on the way. The call she'd been expecting finally came on a Thursday evening. Catherine was reviewing contracts at Vincent's desk when Mrs. Chen buzzed through. There's a Mr. Vitale here to see you. No appointment. Catherine's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed level. Send him in. Salvatore Vitale was 63, gray-haired, and dressed like a banker. Nothing about him screamed criminal except his eyes. Flat and assessing, the eyes of a man who'd watched people die and learned to read which ones would beg. He sat down without being invited. Mrs. Moretti, I knew your husband. Good man. Understood how things work. Vitale's voice was Brooklyn Italian, softened by decades of legitimate business fronts. I'm here because I hear you're making changes. Changes that affect mutual arrangements Vincent and I had. Those arrangements died with my husband, Mr. Vitale. Catherine kept her hands flat on the desk, projecting calm she didn't feel. I'm running a construction company, not a money laundering operation. Vitale smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. You think Vincent was laundering money? No, Mrs. Moretti, he was buying peace protection, insurance that his workers stayed healthy and his sites stayed operational. You stop paying that insurance, accidents happen. I'd hate to see something happen to those beautiful children of yours. The threat was delivered casually, almost kindly. Catherine felt ice form in her stomach, but she'd prepared for this moment. She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. Before we continue, Mr. Vitale, I want you to know that this envelope contains copies of every financial record Vincent kept regarding his arrangements with your organization. Dates, amounts, delivery methods. Also included are similar records for 18 city officials, 7 union representatives, and 4 police officers, all of them connected to your business interests. She slid the envelope across the desk. Vitale didn't touch it. These copies are in a safety deposit box, Catherine continued. If anything happens to me, my children, or any of my workers, the contents get delivered to the FBI field office on Foley Square. Every name, every payment, every detail of how construction really works in this city. It won't just bury you, Mr. Vitale. It'll bury everyone you've ever worked with. The room was very quiet. Somewhere below, a truck horn blared. Vitale's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. A recognition that the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. That's a dangerous game, he said softly. Vincent knew better than to keep records like that. Vincent's dead. Maybe keeping records wasn't his smartest move. Or maybe someone found out he had them and decided he was a liability. Catherine leaned forward. Either way, I'm offering you something better than Vincent did. I'm offering you silence. I don't want your money. I don't want your protection. I just want you to leave me and my company alone. In exchange, those records stay locked away, forever. No FBI, no prosecutors, no newspaper exposés. We both move on. Vitale studied her for a long moment. Then he picked up the envelope, opened it, and scanned the contents. Catherine watched his face carefully. She'd included enough real information to prove she wasn't bluffing, but held back the truly damaging material. Show your cards, her father had taught her, but never the whole hand. Mutually assured destruction, Vitale said finally. That's what you're offering. Mutual survival, Catherine corrected. You stay in your world, I stay in mine. No overlap, no problems. Vitaly set down the envelope. And if I decide you're bluffing? If I decide a widow and 2 kids aren't worth the risk of letting those records exist? Then you'll find out the hard way whether I'm bluffing. Catherine's voice didn't waver. But ask yourself, do you really want to test that? Because Vincent kept those records for 20 years and you never knew. What makes you think I won't keep them for 20 more? The silence stretched out. Finally, Vitaly stood. He buttoned his coat with deliberate care. You're either very brave or very stupid, Mrs. Moretti. I haven't decided which yet. He moved toward the door, then paused. But I'll give you credit. You've got more spine than most men I know. All right, we have a deal. You keep your records locked up, I keep my people away from your business. But understand, this only works if you keep your word. The day those records surface, all bets are off. I understand perfectly, Catherine said. After Vitaly left, Catherine sat in the dark office for 20 minutes, letting the adrenaline drain away. Her hands were shaking. She'd gambled everything on a bluff. Well, a partial bluff. The records were real, the safety deposit box was real, but she had no idea if the FBI would actually care about corruption in construction. For all she knew, half their field office was on the take too. But Vitaly didn't know that, and more importantly, he couldn't afford to find out she was right. The harassment stopped immediately. No more slashed tires, no more delayed inspections, no more mysterious accidents. Moretti Construction's projects moved forward smoothly. Permits appeared on schedule, and the only resistance Catherine faced was the ordinary kind. The skepticism of contractors who didn't like taking orders from a woman. The condescension of bankers who explained simple concepts slowly. She handled it by being relentlessly competent. She learned to read blueprints, understand zoning regulations, negotiate with suppliers who thought they could overcharge a widow. She showed up at job sites before the workers arrived and stayed until after they left. She asked questions until she understood every aspect of the business, and then she asked more questions. By spring, Moretti Construction had completed 2 major projects ahead of schedule and under budget. Catherine's reputation shifted from Vincent's widow trying to play businessman to that Moretti woman who actually knows what she's doing. It wasn't respect yet, but it was recognition, and that was enough. The truth about Vincent's death came in pieces, assembled over months through careful questions and cautious conversations. A supplier mentioned Vincent had been worried about an audit. A former union rep let slip that Vincent had refused to increase his payments. Leonard Schwartz, after 3 whiskeys at a bar on Canal Street, admitted that Vincent had been planning to go legitimate, to cut ties with the Vitaly family and run the business clean. He was going to do what you did, Schwartz said quietly. Go straight, document everything, force them out through leverage. But he waited too long, made too many promises he couldn't keep. When he finally tried to break free, they made an example. Catherine stared into her coffee. So I'm finishing what he started. You succeeded where he failed, Schwartz corrected. Vincent tried to ease into it, negotiate a peaceful exit. You just kicked down the door and dared them to stop you. It's crazy. It shouldn't have worked, but somehow it did. That night, Catherine stood at her bedroom window watching the lights of Little Italy flicker like stars. She thought about Vincent, his caution, his careful deals, his belief that you could slowly extract yourself from a system designed to hold you forever. He'd been wrong. The only way out was through, fast and hard, before anyone could organize resistance. She'd survived. But at what cost? The business was cleaner, but it was also lonelier. The men who worked for her respected her competence, but not her presence. She was the widow who wouldn't go away, the woman who insisted on playing a man's game. She'd won, but she'd won alone. By autumn 1955, Catherine Moretti had transformed from anomaly to institution. The woman who'd taken over her husband's construction company was now simply the woman who ran Moretti Construction. No qualifiers, no asterisks. She bid on city contracts and won them. She hired workers based on skill, not connections. She paid her taxes, filed her permits, and operated with a transparency that made her simultaneously boring and bulletproof. The office on Delancey Street had expanded. Catherine hired 2 more secretaries, promoted Frank Palmieri to operations manager, and brought in a young accountant from Columbia who understood the difference between creative bookkeeping and fraud. Moretti Construction was growing, and more surprisingly, it was growing legitimately. But success brought its own complications. The larger they grew, the more visible they became. And visibility, in a city where corruption was currency, meant pressure. The pressure came from an unexpected direction. Commissioner Wallace from the Buildings Department arrived unannounced on a gray October morning. He was 50, well-dressed, and carried the confident air of a man who'd never been told no. "Mrs. Moretti, I'll be direct. Your company's growth has been impressive. Almost unprecedented for a firm your size." Wallace settled into the chair across from her desk. "But I'm concerned about quality control. We've had complaints. Nothing official, you understand. About rushed work, corners being cut." Catherine set down her pen. "Really? Because our inspection record is spotless. Every project has passed every code review on the first attempt. So I'm curious about these mysterious complaints." Wallace smiled. "Perhaps concerns is a better word. The department wants to ensure that companies operating at your scale maintain appropriate oversight. We're proposing a special review process for larger contractors, monthly inspections, detailed audits, that sort of thing." "And what would this special review process cost?" "There'd be administrative fees, of course. Processing costs, say, $2,000 a month to start." Catherine leaned back. So this was the play. Create a problem, offer a solution, collect payment. Vincent had dealt with versions of this for years. But Catherine wasn't Vincent. "Commissioner Wallace, I appreciate your concern for quality. So I'll tell you what. I'll submit to your special review process, free of charge. In fact, I'll open our books to your auditors, provide full documentation of every project, and make myself available for questioning. Complete transparency." Wallace's smile faded. "That's not quite what I had in mind. And I'll also reach out to the Times," Catherine continued. "They've been wanting to do a feature on women in construction. I'm sure they'd love to include a section on how progressive the Buildings Department is, conducting thorough quality reviews. We could make it a real showcase of municipal oversight." The temperature in the room dropped. Wallace stood slowly. "Mrs. Moretti, you're making a mistake. In this city, you need friends. Making enemies of the wrong people. I have all the friends I need, Commissioner. They're called customers, and they like the fact that I build things on time and on budget. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do." After Wallace left, Catherine called Leonard Schwartz. The attorney arrived within the hour, and she briefed him on the conversation. "He'll try to bury you in bureaucracy," Schwartz warned. "Every permit delayed, every inspection prolonged. It'll cost you more than the $2,000 a month. Then we go public. I'm serious about the Times interview. If they want to play dirty, we'll make it expensive for them to stay dirty." The interview ran 2 weeks later. The reporter, a sharp woman named Ellen Hutchins, was fascinated by Catherine's story. Widow takes over construction company, refuses to play by old rules, succeeds through competence rather than connections. The piece ran on the front page of the business section with a photo of Catherine standing in front of a construction site, hard hat tucked under her arm. The response was immediate and unexpected. 3 other contractors, all women who'd inherited or started small businesses, reached out to Catherine. They'd been facing similar pressures, similar shakedowns, but had stayed quiet for fear of retaliation. The Times piece gave them courage. Catherine organized a meeting at a neutral location, a restaurant in Midtown far from Little Italy's watchful eyes. 5 women showed up, 2 widows, 1 divorcee, and 2 who'd started their companies from nothing. They shared stories of harassment, bribes disguised as fees, contracts mysteriously awarded to connected men despite lower bids. "We should formalize this," Catherine suggested. "Create an association, pool our resources, share information about corrupt officials, support each other when pressure comes. There's power in numbers." The Women's Construction Alliance was born that afternoon over coffee and cannoli. It started with 5 members and grew to 12 within a month. They developed a simple protocol. When one member got pressured for a bribe, the others would collectively file complaints with oversight agencies. Individual voices got ignored. A chorus demanded answers. Commissioner Wallace's special review process quietly disappeared. The Buildings Department, facing uncomfortable questions from multiple contractors and increasing press attention, decided that perhaps quality control was adequate after all. But Catherine's victory came with a price. The men she'd fought against, the corrupt officials, the mobbed-up union reps, the inspectors on the take, didn't forget. They adapted. New regulations appeared, carefully worded to disadvantage smaller contractors. Licensing requirements became more Byzantine. The game continued, just with different rules. On a cold evening in December, 1 year after Vincent's death, Catherine sat in her office and reviewed the year's finances. Moretti Construction had grossed $300,000. They'd completed 9 major projects. They'd hired 16 new workers. By any measure, it was a success. But Catherine felt empty. She'd won the battle for the business, but somewhere in the fighting she'd lost something else. Her children saw her at breakfast and dinner, but rarely in between. She had colleagues, but no friends. The women in the alliance respected her, but they weren't confidants. She was competent, powerful, successful, and profoundly alone. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Frank Palmieri stood in the doorway, holding a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "It's been a year," he said simply. "Thought you might want company." Catherine gestured to the chair. Frank poured 2 generous drinks and raised his glass. "To Vincent," Frank said. "To Vincent," Catherine echoed. They drank in silence for a moment. Then Frank spoke again. "You know, when you first took over, I gave you 2 months. Figured you'd sell out or get crushed. But you proved me wrong. Hell, you proved everyone wrong. And you resent me for it." It wasn't a question. Frank considered this. "Maybe at first. But not anymore. You did what Vincent couldn't. You got us out from under all that mob bullshit, all those payoffs. It's cleaner now. Harder, but cleaner. I respect that." "Harder?" Catherine swirled her whiskey. "That's the part nobody tells you. Being legitimate is actually harder than being corrupt. You can't buy your way out of problems. You can't make calls to fix things. You have to actually be good at what you do." "Yeah, well, turns out you are. Good at it, I mean." Frank refilled their glasses. Vincent would be proud. Or jealous. Maybe both. Catherine smiled despite herself. He'd be horrified. All his careful arrangements, his quiet deals. I burned it all down in a month. And built something better. Different, anyway. Frank stood to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Moretti, I'm glad you didn't sell. Place wouldn't be the same without you." After Frank left, Catherine walked to the window. Below, Delancey Street was alive with Friday night energy. Restaurants filling up, people heading home from work, the city's endless metabolism continuing. She'd become part of this landscape now, another fixture in the machinery of New York. Her reflection in the window glass looked older than 36. Harder. The soft woman who'd poured coffee at dinner parties was gone, replaced by someone who read contracts for pleasure and negotiated with gangsters. She'd wanted to protect Vincent's legacy, to save something for her children. She'd done that, but she'd also created something new, a business that ran on merit rather than influence, a company where the rules actually meant something. Was it worth it? The loneliness, the constant battles, the knowledge that she'd always be an outsider in a man's world. Catherine didn't know, but she knew she couldn't go back. Whatever she'd been before Vincent's death was gone, replaced by this harder, sharper version of herself. She locked the office and walked home through the December cold. The apartment was warm, the children asleep. Catherine poured herself a final drink and sat at the kitchen table with Vincent's photo. In it, he was smiling, relaxed, taken at some forgotten summer picnic, before the debts, before the pressure, before whatever decision had put a bullet in his head. "I finished what you started," she told the photo quietly. "Not the way you planned, but it's done. We're free, or as free as anyone gets in this city." The photo didn't answer. Catherine finished her drink and went to bed, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights, new tests of whether a widow could truly remake the world her husband had left behind. But tonight, for the first time in a year, she slept soundly. The sleep of someone who'd survived, who'd adapted, who'd proven that power wasn't just inherited or seized, but could be built, brick by brick, through competence and unbreakable will. Outside, snow began to fall on Little Italy, blanketing the streets where Vincent had made his deals and Catherine had remade his legacy. The city slept, but the Moretti family business stayed awake. Lights burning in offices and construction sites, a woman's determination transforming what it meant to survive in post-war New York, where loyalty and survival and moral compromise collided, and where one widow had rewritten the rules of power.